I like to dedicate this to all of the Creator's righteous children. I have some food in my bag for you. Not that edible food, that food you eat. No, I have some food for thought. Since knowledge is infinite, it has infinitely fell on me.
But until you understand that we are seriously all connected, there's no difference in spirit. There's this fallacy that humankind is the hierarchy over everything else. We're the most destructive things on the planet, actually. But Mother has her own energy. She has her own spirit. She has a vibrant heartbeat that beats, and she will take care of herself. And if you can't, and when you see all of these storms and things that people are, oh, you know, as soon as something happens, a hurricane, this, that, that's her way of cleansing. She has to be able to balance her own energy, and she will take care of herself. And so our thing is, we need to take care of ourselves. We have to come out of this hierarchy-minded thing and become very grounded and humble that we're part of this earth. We are made from earth, but mostly water. And water is so important, and you see how this wonderful river was so vibrant and called everybody, and as soon as you got here it was like, oh, we know you're coming, and everybody ran straight down, straight to the water and said, yeah, and so everything else just, you know, it didn't matter what we had planned to do, what the sequencing was or whatever, the river said come, and we all received it, and we all went. We didn't think about it, we felt it, and intuited that's where we were supposed to be. And how awesome did you feel after you went out there on that river? Even if you didn't go in the boats, just to be in the presence of the water. Yes. And it was something so uplifting, and everybody was glowing when they came off that river, and was just, you know, and so that's the kind of energy that we always need to have with everything. And so that was what I was guided to teach, is not even teach, just to remind that little kids know if you let them loose, they're in the dirt, they're all covering themselves, they're like cleansing, baptizing themselves in dirt, water, mud, leaves, you know, they're throwing leaves up and they celebrate nature. We get to be a certain, oh, that's dirty, better go wash my hands, let me get this off of me, you know, let's pull this up, I'll pull up all the medicine plants because now they've become weeds. And what a travesty, because those are the bounty that Mother gives us. She puts medicine out there, Mother, Father, however you intuit and call divine presence. But just looking out here, there's so many plants out there that are free for the taking. You didn't grow these, you didn't have to nurture them or anything, they just gifted themselves to you. And so when people have this poor-mindedness of, I lack this, I lack that, I don't have money, I don't have, you have, and you have it for free, and all you have to do is say thank you and be humble with it, right? So part of doing river ceremonies for years is the way, what I have connected with, how I've connected with water. Since I was a child, I grew up in California, so we spent a lot of time at the beach and in that ocean all the time, and there was a connection that I had with the water. I remember my sisters and I, we used to go out, we'd dive through the breakers all the time. We'd wait until the biggest ones came, and you wait until it's almost there, and then you dive through it. Well, of course, I'm the one that got up there and dove and it was too late, and so I curled right into that wave. I think I was about maybe 8 years old, and my eyes are wide open, and I'm just tumbling with this big wave, and I'm watching the sand and the shells and everything tumbling around with me. I'm just watching this stuff, saying, "Wow, look at that!" And then I thought, I wonder if I'm dead. But then, of course, once you spit out on the ground and you stand up and you're looking around, you're like, no, you're not dead. But it was an awesome energetic of being in a whole nother space of something so magical and seeing something outside of yourself on a whole nother level. And I think part of my journey has always been that I've always believed that there are other beings, fairies, whatever people, however people want to call that realm of those beings. They are very much alive and well, and they've been holding this energy of this land and all other, every culture I can think of has little people, as the native people call them here. The Irish call them the gentry or the fairies or the sprites, and you know, the people in Iceland, they're very much in tune with their little people, because there are even towns where you have to get a building permit where they go out and survey to see where the fairy mounds are, and you cannot put a road or a house or anything in that area. And the mayor of the town goes out regularly and communes with these beings and talks to them, because somebody had tried to do just that, and they kept breaking down all the equipment. Every time they would come bring those big machines in, they would break down, and so they called the mayor in, and he went out and he said, well, where are you trying to, you know, dig here? And he said, there are fairy mounds there, that's their territory, you cannot build there. And so now, you know, within the native tradition, we feed the little people just like people feed their ancestors and all that. We also, if we're conscious about it, we do feed them as well. And yes, it's true, they like little cakes and honeys and things like that, and you can invite them to interact with you by leaving them those gifts. And so I guess the main thing is that you have to go back to having that childlike energy and spirit of mind, that everything is possible. Everything does have a spirit, everything has energy. We know that water, we're mostly made up of water. There's nothing different between that river and me. It's almost all water. It's got some dirt and it's got some other things in it, right? But it's mostly water. It has a flow and an ebb. It has different ways that it interacts with people. Sometimes it's very calm and soothing. Sometimes it's angry and in turmoil or stressed out. And when people are polluting and dumping, you'll find that of course, all the wildlife, the fish and the other things in there, they are affected, and that's also the responsibility of humankind. Where does it say that we have the right to harm other things, and we don't consciously think about how those things happen? Every time you litter, every time you know, dump things and pollute things, you are harming not just that, you're harming yourself, because there is that responsibility that you have to each other. Hands down to your head. Put your hands out, they'll start to tingle, you'll be able to feel. If you ask, who needs help? Go outside, say, you know, I'm here, I'm available, who needs help? See what pulls you. If you need help, go outside and say, I really need some help. Who's available? Who's willing to help me? You'll get pulled to a tree. It could be a rock, could be a handful. Just sit down on the ground, sit on the dirt, and I will help you. That kind of level of interaction is where we need to evolve to, and we need to do it quickly. Not because we're going to save the earth, we're going to save ourselves. So we're going to go outside now, and we're going to go put our feet in the earth and stand there. And don't everybody have issues about taking your shoes off and standing. You can stand in the grass if you can't stand in dirt. But get barefoot, let's go outside and just be still. Be still, and the first thing you want to do is, before you ask to receive, you thank. You're in gratitude. Don't, you know, a lot of times we're out, what can I get? Give me this, give me that, I'm going to take this, I'm going to take. No, you go and you thank it for being there and being available to help you. And that's the reciprocity. And we've lost that along the way, some kind of way, is that reciprocity. And if we can't deal with the earth, and we can't deal with the trees and the nature and the water and the river and all, how are we going to deal with each other?
Right, right.
And it does not discriminate. You know, when a storm comes, it doesn't say, oh, I'm just going to hit you, and I'm going to get you, and I'm going to get you, and sometimes it does. There are, you know, exceptions. But generally, when that wind blows, it's coming, it doesn't care. It's coming and it's taking out, it's doing what it needs to do. And so we need to stop this feeling of superiority. There are a lot of things that have been done to our peoples. There are a lot of things that are happening to our people now, of all races. Some more than others, and we know in the African American and African communities and communities of color, it's very bad. So your choice is, it's not to know these things are happening, it's just how much of your energy you want to invest in that. You have to acknowledge it, you have to fight against it. But your allies are nature, because no matter what you do to it, it will survive. It will grow in another way. It will evolve into something else that when you have a bad fire and everything is burned down, or a volcanic eruption and everything is covered with lava and it dies, eventually you'll see a nice little green plant come up in wherever that was, right? Nature will provide and take care of it, and will renew itself. And we have renewed ourselves as people continually, over and over. Thing is not to get stuck in what's going on, but to evolve higher, because we can shift anything we want to shift if our spirit is willing to do so, because everything comes from spirit, everything comes from the evolution. And I think, like when the Dalai Lama talks about praying and evolving into a higher space where you don't have anger, and people are like, that's impossible with what's going on, who's in the White House, this, that, and the other. Yes, but what he knows is that he's not blind to what's going on out there, but he also knows that there is a dimensional shift that takes place, that he can become a part of, and he is, and other people can become a part of, and we can create what we want to be. We can create the world we want to have, because every time you affirm negativity, you empower it to get worse, bigger. So instead of affirming the negative, affirm the positive. I'm not living like that. You're not going to treat me this way. This is not the vision I have for the land that I want to live. And you can vibrate to a higher level. You won't be in this denseness. You can vibrate somewhere higher. And when you notice that, when you're connected with nature, your dimensional fields can open up, and you can see, you can step into a whole nother reality. You're still standing where you were, but everything else is shifted into someplace else that's a higher, more loving, more evolved space. So let's go out and create some dialogue with nature. And then we'll end by going to the river and giving thanks for the support that it holds. And while you're out there with the trees and things, just take time to thank them. You know, just thank them, send them some love, send them some healing energy, and some gratitude for being here and supporting us. Allergies make tea. You can, yeah. It's a good medicinal. It's good for detoxing. You know, when you want to do a detox, there is. What else do we have?
So, did you say clover?
That's
That's a type of clover with this yellow flower.
Yeah, and you can eat that.
And
what's this one, Rabia?
Huh?
What's this one, Sister Rabia?
I don't know.
I'll have a clue.
But I'll tell you that plants generally grow with in a relationship where a lot of times if there's a poisonous plant, the cure for it will grow very close to it or around it. There's, so, and that doesn't mean going around sampling everything. If I eat this, let me see if I eat that. Not advocating for that. But learn what's in your yard, because and if you don't spray chemicals and pesticides and you have organic things that are growing, just like the violets, we have an abundance where I live, and I've been picking violets. And making, you can eat the leaves, you can eat the flowers, you make tea out of them. They're so pretty, but they taste good too. And you can make tea. I've been freezing them in ice cubes for punch in the summer when you want to do a nice punch or something, and you just float some ice cubes with flowers that taste good. Red bud trees, same thing. So, and dandelions, and we have our official dandelion person here.
Wine lady.
Dandelion wine lady. But if you don't want to make dandelion wine, you dig up the roots, clean them off, and you can roast them and eat them. They are a really good detoxer. You want to get stuff out of your system. You can take the flower heads and wash them, batter them, make fritters out of them. You can eat, make tea out of it. Dandelion has a lot of really good healthy properties. It's one of the most cursed weeds, but one of the best ones for you, and people,
Isn't that ironic?
It is ironic, yeah.
Even dandelion hooch?
Yeah. Yes, dandelion hooch.
Right.
And so, there you go. Yeah, chickweed is really good.
How do you harvest this one? Do you just pick it up, so to speak?
Well, this one's kind of sun bleached.
Well, okay, so you pick it.
You want to get vibrant green.
So yeah, like exactly. The more vibrant green that it is, the more fresh it is, and it has more medicinal property.
Yeah.
And then like this is actually not the best time of day to harvest. For most things, in the morning is best to harvest, like after the dew has dried, but before any essential oil has been burned off by the sun from the plants. There are exceptions like calendula. That is more like harvested in the afternoon, but generally speaking it's good to harvest things in the morning. And then like find the vibrant color, and like chickweed, you can just like take some scissors and cut it and eat it right away, or eat it in a salad, or there's ways of like extracting its medicine to make salves, and there's a lot of options.
And there are some, we have a beautiful full moon tonight, and that's a really good opportunity to go out and really make a connection with her as well. Grandmother is so really loving and caring for this planet and her daughter, and she can impart tremendous amounts of wisdom. That's why you have so many cultures where people do moon ceremonies and the oracles go and consult the moon, because the energy that the moon has, and another living being. I have taken people out to do moon ceremonies, and you can actually, you can see her face, and she's singing. She's singing, and I've taken people out to just drum and sing with her. And at first they said, "I don't see any face. I can't see her. I can't." On the moon. Yeah, but as they started drumming and they started singing, and they stopped working so hard, they started singing her, and she's constantly singing and trying to. And she is not the only one. It's funny how this whole energy, quick aside, is like, look at these stars and these planets, and they all have their own personalities, and astrologers can tell you all kinds of things, but if you really pay attention and you look at them, like Pluto, they've declared a male planet, female as you want to be. Not just female, she has braids, she's very African actually. I'm digressing, which I always do. Sorry, I apologize. So let's, anybody want to?
whether the stuff that we have been doing in places like Africa and South Asia might be of some value here in Maryland. I thought we might get started just by reminding each other of our names, because some of you I'm meeting for the first time, and I think some folks are meeting each other for the first time, and then also maybe one thing that brings you hope right now. Anybody want to start? Seriously inspiring. So yeah, so thank you, Fred, for bringing us all together. And for the vital work you've been doing for 20 years.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Without much reward. Yeah, 19 I hear. I hear it's 19.
Who's counting?
He'll take it.
We'll have to have the 20th, like next year when we gather, maybe that'll be the
celebration.
Yeah, the 20th birthday. So I wanted to talk a little bit about law. And it's not going to be too in the weeds, but even just starting with the philosophy of law. Like the reason I went to law school is because I had some big ideas about law. I felt law was supposed to be the language we use to translate dreams about justice into actual institutions and rules that hold us together. I thought law was supposed to be the difference between a society ruled by the most powerful and one that honors the dignity of everyone, strong or weak. But that is not the world we live in. The UN did a study, and they came up with a rough estimate that 4 billion people around the world live outside the protection of the law. And these people can be driven from their lands, they can be intimidated by violence, they can be excluded from society. And I almost dropped out of law school as I came to recognize that even the profession itself seemed more a part of the problem than part of the solution. But I ended up hanging in there. Some friends persuaded me, don't leave yet, just hang in there. And but I still kind of felt a little uncomfortable, a little at sea. I clerked for a judge out in California, which sometimes people do after they finish. And then I worked for this big group called Human Rights Watch, which you might have heard of, which is one of the mainline human rights groups. Still feeling a little unsure of like what exactly was I going to do with this training that I had. And I ended up moving to Sierra Leone in 2003, which is something that Fred and I have in common, and Elaine and I have in common, was having spent time there. I ended up living there for 4 years. And when I moved there, it was right after the end of a brutal civil war that had ended basically like 10, 12 months before I got there. And that war had lasted 11 years, and it had ravaged the country, the people, the institutions. And there were a couple of things set up to try to look at justice in a backward-looking way. Like, let's hold the people who did this accountable. There was something called the Special Court for Sierra Leone that the international community set up, and there was something called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to try to tell truth about what happened. But meanwhile, many Sierra Leoneans were asking, that's going to help us look backwards. What about looking forwards? What are we going to do tomorrow and the next day and the next year to deal with injustice in our daily lives? Because the reason that the war had happened, and there was sort of a consensus about this, the reason that the war had happened was a degree of injustice and arbitrariness in government that had made people frustrated and alienated and led them to pick up arms. And so they were asking a question like, going forward, we can look backwards to hold people accountable, but how are we going to make justice more accessible going forward? And it was an open question what that would look like, because Sierra Leone, like many countries in Africa, has a dual legal system where there is a formal system which is based on British law, because the Brits were the colonial power. And then that sits alongside what's called a customary system, which is based on traditional African law. And the two systems, in principle, are kind of integrated under one constitution. But in practice, they sort of sit side by side, and they almost don't pay attention to each other. It's like two parallel worlds. And lawyers, there were 100 lawyers in the country total when I moved there. And out of the 100, more than 90 lived in Freetown, in the capital. So if you go to the countryside, forget about it. You know, like even a rich person couldn't find a lawyer. And moreover, those customary institutions are the ones that most people turn to, but lawyers don't have any role in the customary institution. So you had this tiny professional tribe, and they literally wear wigs and bibs when they go to court.
Oh my God.
Yes, in that African heat, they wear these white wigs, and it's crazy.
Colonial times.
Exactly.
Don't they do that in England still?
Yeah, they do that. In
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, that's just what they do.
Yeah. So they do it in Sierra Leone still too. So they have this little tiny tribe of professionals focused on this formal system, and then everybody else living under this customary system for which that little tiny tribe of lawyers is inaccessible and irrelevant. So so a lawyer-based model of providing legal aid would have been a non-starter. So what we did instead was we deployed what we sometimes call community paralegals, or sometimes people say barefoot lawyers, who can sort of be a bridge between that formal system on the one hand and real life on the other hand. And we didn't make this up. It turns out this goes way back. Starting in the 1950s in South Africa, there were community paralegals like this who helped people to survive the apartheid system, because that had so many different rules about where you could go, where you could, who you could marry, who you could talk to, where you could work, what pass you had to have in your pocket based on where you were on the street. And these paralegals would help people to navigate those rules and defend themselves and try to survive that oppressive system. So we spent the first person I hired was a Sierra Leonean lawyer who ended up really being my partner, my teammate, this guy named Simeon Karoma, a young Sierra Leonean lawyer. And the two of us went to South Africa and we studied that tradition of community paralegals in South Africa for several weeks. And then we came back to Sierra Leone and we tried to figure out, okay, in this post-war dual legal system context, what could that look like? And I ended up staying there for 4 years, and what we found was that these community paralegals could equip people to understand the rules and to advocate for themselves. And they could creatively straddle the customary and the formal systems. And it's not like things went from night to day, or that injustice to justice is immediate at all. But they are able to, some of the time, squeeze justice out of that broken system. And so I did that for 4 years, and then actually went to the World Bank for a few years. But I left the World Bank in 2011 with the hope that we could build a global movement around this approach of community legal workers and what we call legal empowerment. And by that we mean taking the power of law and putting it in the hands of people. Because too often law is like this abstract, complex thing that is somewhere else. It feels like a spaceship or a foreign language, you know. It's
a foreign language.
It often is in a foreign, exactly. It often uses Latin words, and it just feels like this alien thing that is intimidating, that is abstract. And the idea of what we mean by legal empowerment is we want to turn that upside down and turn law from an abstraction or a threat into something that every single person can understand, use, and shape. In fact, that is almost like our mantra is know law, use law, shape law. All of us should be able to do that. Not just the tiny profession that went to law school, but everyone, because these are the rules of our democracy, and sometimes they are wrong. So that's why, to your point, ma'am, sometimes the rules themselves are a tool of oppression, and that's why it's not just know law, use law. It's know law, use law, shape law. Because ultimately we need to be able to reshape it to make it closer to the version of the society that we want and deserve. So today we work with community paralegals in 6 different countries, and we host a global network dedicated to legal empowerment with people from all over the world, from 130 countries. And I just wanted to give a couple of stories of what that work looks like. In particular, one of the areas that our paralegals focus on, looks like Luke is okay down there. Future water keeper.
They're old hands, they know what they're doing.
A little too quiet down there.
Yeah, right? I just want to over my shoulder, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and feel free to stop me at any point if you have a question. I'm not going to talk too long. I really want to have a conversation, but I thought I would just tell a couple stories to give you a sense of what this looks like in practice. One is from India, which is where my family is from. And let's see, how do I do this?
Which province of India is the case story?
The case story is from Gujarat, which is exactly where my family's from. I normally wouldn't show this man's face, but he would want me to show his face to you guys.
Okay.
You know, I usually change his name and blur his face for safety, but this is family, you know, and if he was here, he would be so thrilled to meet all of you, and especially to meet Fred. He is from a community of herds people, so they traditionally tend sheep, cattle, goats. And 20 years ago, his entire community, his whole village, was forced to move because a multinational corporation constructed a manufacturing facility on the land where they lived. So they up and moved. The factory displaced them. Thank you, ma'am. That was when he was 10 years old. That was a long time ago. He's like 57 now. Then 20 years after that, 100 meters from the new place where they got moved to, the same company built a cement factory. And it is literally, he's standing at his house right now.
Oh, wow.
The cement factory is literally, you could throw a stone and hit the cement factory from where he lives now. I don't know if you guys can see.
Yeah, we can see.
Okay.
This sounds.
What'd you say?
We know the story.
You know the story, yes.
River here.
We're coming to that. That's why I'm here. Yeah, that's exactly why I'm here. So they built the cement factory, and I was there. The first time I was there was in 2016. I spent 2 days in this place, and I ended up coughing for a week.
Wow.
That's how dirty the air is. And he says that if people or animals drink anything, any of the water in that village, or eat anything that grows in that village, I mean, we were just admiring all the good things that grow. If you eat anything that grows in this village, you get sick.
Cement dust.
And there's multiple kinds of pollution, but yes, from the dust is primarily, and they're herds people, so they have cattle and buffalo and sheep, and goats, and now they walk long distances to find uncontaminated grazing land, and as a result of that, many of the children have dropped out of school, including 3 of his own kids. 3 of his own kids ended up dropping out of school because they were walking these long distances to find uncontaminated grazing land. And he had appealed, and this speaks to some of the experience that Fred has shared with me, he had appealed to the company for years. He said to me, I've written so many letters to this company, my family could cremate me with them. If they took all those letters, they wouldn't have to buy any wood. They'd be good. That's how many letters I've written. But he said the company ignored every one of those letters. And so in 2013, he announced that he was going to set himself on fire. And he, out of protest, because all of his other protests hadn't worked, and he had reached that level of desperation, he brought a bucket of petrol to the gates of that factory and was ready to set himself on fire to protest the way in which this company had destroyed his people, his homeland. He ended up getting arrested because it's illegal in India to commit suicide. He ended up getting arrested before he could follow through. Yeah, those if they are caught before they do it, despite all these farmer suicides that are happening right now, it's technically illegal. So he ended up, because this was a big public thing, the company sent like 100 police officers, and they arrested him before he could follow through. He didn't have to spend long in jail, but he felt completely defeated. But then, a couple years later, he met one of these community legal workers, these community paralegals that we work with. His name is Hasmukh, and again, I normally wouldn't show his face because this work is dangerous that he does, but he would want to meet all of you, and he would want to show his face to you guys. So I'm telling you his real name and showing you. He's a young guy. I mean, he's somewhere. I mean, there's some youth here. He's 20s, you know.
Where?
And Hasmukh explained to Devaram that there was law on his side. That he didn't just need to plea for mercy, which is what he had been doing. That he actually had law on his side. And Hasmukh translated into Gujarati something that Devaram had never seen, which is called the consent to operate. It's similar to the permits that factories have here. And the consent to operate laid out all these specific conditions that yes, the company is allowed to run, but only if it complies with specific conditions. Devaram had never seen that thing, and yet his people had been living in the shadow of this factory for all this time.
And it wasn't translated into English.
And it was only available in English. So the first thing that Hasmukh did was translate into Gujarati, break it down into simple terms, because that's what paralegals do. They demystify law. They break it down into simple terms. And then when they looked at it, they were like, holy there are a number of things that are in this document which are not happening in practice. So they collected evidence together. It's not like Hasmukh did this for Devaram. They did it together.
Yeah.